Hey guys, I'm back again. I was playing a really good video game, but then I got really into it, and then I ended up in a plane that's between fiction and reality, and I can't get out. Someone help me out, please. I mean, not too bad. It's nice, just me, the void, and then McDonald's that's here for some reason. I mean, it's fun. It's nice here. I mean, instead of, actually trying to get out of here, I guess I could talk about immersion in video games, because, it's been a while since I've made a video, I gotta do it. How do I usually start these things anyways? Immersion in video games, it's such a vague concept. It's that feeling when you're in a game, you're getting really into it, and then it's just you and the game. Like, everything else outside doesn't matter, it's just you at that moment with the game. Now, to talk about what factors make up immersion in video games, I think we need to first talk about what factors reduce immersion in video games, and a big one is glitches. Now, immersion hinges on the idea that you, as the developer, are creating a believable world for your player to experience. But when you have some weird thing like flying ragdolls, right, it breaks immersion because it breaks the norm, and that breaks the believability of that world you've created. This isn't to say that all glitches are bad. I'm definitely not saying that. I think we can all agree that to an extent glitches are very fun, and especially in some cases, they actually build the meta of a video game, like for example, the backwards long jump in Mario 64. Can you imagine the speedrunning game for Mario 64 if that wasn't there? What I'm getting at is that, of course, glitches are fine in certain cases, right? And of course, they're a neutral thing. They're not like a good or bad thing. They can work out for the better, and sometimes they can work out for the worse. But the thing is, they break immersion. Like, when someone's doing an insane backwards long jump in Mario 64, I wouldn't really call that immersion, because it just doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel like something that would happen in that world naturally. However, that doesn't mean that all glitches and exploits immediately ruin immersion. For example, I can think of that bomb jump technique from Breath of the Wild, the wall jump from Metroid, iron farming in Minecraft. These are all exploitative techniques, right? But they don't break the immersion of the game despite them not really being intended by the developers. The reason these exploits don't break immersion while the backwards long jump does is because these feel natural within the world. For example, the bomb explodes and it sends the Link all the way over there. That makes sense. Now compare the backwards long jump to the bomb jump. One feels like a magic trick and it was an oversight by the developers. And the second one, while you could think that it's like an oversight from the developers, but at the same time, you can also rationalize, yeah, that makes sense. That seems like something that the character could do, and it seems like a logical extension of their abilities. And that's what immersion is about. It's about trying to keep a norm feeling. You can't break the norm too much or else you're gonna break immersion. And a big example of games that break the norm frequently are multiplayer games. Now, compare GTA single player versus GTA Online. Now, single player, it's nice, right? You're walking through Vespucci Beach, there's NPCs, and the NPCs act like how they would in real life, like how people would act. If you shoot a gun, they'll run. If you say hi, they'll say hi back. In multiplayer, though, when a guy's running through the city with a giant tank, it kind of breaks immersion, because that's not what would happen normally in the setting they've kind of tried to establish in the world. And multiplayer also brings on another thing that completely breaks immersion, in my opinion, and that's voice chat. Voice chat is the absolute killer of immersion. Now, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying we should remove voice chat, but then again, usually voice chat's filled with a bunch of children and people yelling slurs at me, so, maybe tone it down, but basically what I'm trying to say is, it's bad because it connects you to the real world again. Hearing someone's voice from their mic in your game is a complete immersion breaker, because it does the exact opposite of what you want. It connects you back to the real world. But that's not to say multiplayer is completely unimmersive. I think it can be done. You just have to have a sense of normalcy with the players. Like, when someone enters into voice chat, all of a sudden, right, it breaks immersion because you're not used to it. But let's say you're all in like a Discord call with all your friends, or you're in a giant, Minecraft server. You expect players to be there, right? So it creates that feeling of normalcy, and again, it puts you back into the game world. But there is one thing that pretty much every single time breaks immersion, and that's fourth wall breaking. The biggest offender of this is easily the Deadpool video game. Not only is just fourth wall humor sometimes, it's just not funny sometimes. I get it. You know that you're in a video game, it's not really funny the 10th time you do it, right? But when a character constantly acknowledges that they're not real, it doesn't create a feeling of normalcy for me. It just reminds me over and over again, hey, you're not what you're playing, it's not real, you're in the real world, you're not in this video game. and that's kind of annoying because I want to be immersed in a video game, but when they constantly try to acknowledge the fact that they are a video game, it ruins it for me. However, sometimes breaking immersion can actually be a fun experience in itself. Now, when you break immersion sometimes, when you immediately snap the connection from the player from the game, right, it creates this feeling of unease and horror. Like when you're in your room at 3 a.m., right, and everything, just you and your computer screen, right, and then the computer screen just turns off. It creates that uneasy feeling, right, that comfort that was there, the video game, the computer, whatever you're on, right, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, that feeling of horror from when you break the immersion. That in itself can be a hooking experience. And you know, a lot of games do that with their horror. They break immersion very quickly, so it creates that feeling of uneasiness. Okay, and now that we've talked about what breaks immersion, I think we can finally talk about what makes immersion. But one thing I want to bring up is the difference between realism and immersion. They are not one and the same. Realism, of course, can help immersion, but it does not equal immersion. Just because a game's not realistic doesn't mean it isn't immersive. Like, think about all the fantasy games you've played, all the platformers. Would you say all of them, you've never felt immersed? I think, obviously, that a game doesn't have to be realistic to be immersive. I think the biggest advancement we've made when it comes to immersion in video games is easily VR. Like, let's say you're a kid, right, and you're playing on your Wii, and it's you and the TV. I'm not saying you can't be immersed. I've definitely been immersed while playing on TV, right? But there's always that issue of the outside world still. You are still not as connected as you could be. With VR, there's no disconnect. It's just you, your vision, and the game. That's it. There's nothing else. I guess the biggest issue with VR as a whole when it comes to immersion in video games is just that you can't really afford it for many people. There's only so many games that support VR, and it's already such an expensive thing with so much setup that at this point it's pretty much just a thing that YouTubers do exclusively. I haven't seen a single person I know in real life own a VR headset. But if the stars align and somehow you have the opportunity to play a good game with a VR headset and the controls work and everything like that, then I'd say you're set for a pretty good and immersive experience. But that's just the technology, right? Realistic graphics, they help out, of course. VR, that helps out, of course. But surely, even before back in like the N64 days and the NES days, we always had immersion in video games. And what are those factors that lead into that, right? Well, a big one is something I'm going to show you right now. So I'm going to show you 3 clips from 3 games, all varying of genre, and I want you to guess what they have in common. All right, I'm going to show it to you in 3, 2, 1. Now they just released a new game. Did you guess it? Alright, if you didn't, let me tell you. Alright, the common thing between these 3 games is silence. Or at the very least, you know, subtlety when it comes to, whatever. It's a lack of soundtrack, or at least a subtle soundtrack. Now again, don't get me wrong, soundtracks are usually a very integral part of a video game that I always appreciate, right? But the thing is, sometimes it just doesn't make sense within the context of the world. Why is this music playing? There's no real person in universe that's playing the music. So again, it's another thing that kind of doesn't always break immersion, because we're kind of used to it. As people play video games, you kind of just accept the idea that, oh, there's just music playing, that's nice. But still, I think subconsciously in our minds, we kind of acknowledge sometimes, where's the music coming from? And that brings me into the idea of diegetic soundtracks. A perfect example, in my opinion, of a good diegetic soundtrack is the main theme of Luigi's Mansion. Now, on its own, yes, this theme is great. It's pretty iconic. I think everyone can agree that this is a good soundtrack. But what makes it better is that there's an in-universe explanation, or at least connection, to why the song is playing. Luigi is humming the song, and the soundtrack combines with it to complete the song. So, subconsciously you think, oh, that makes sense. Luigi's humming the song, and the soundtrack completes that. That makes sense, and there's an in-universe connection or explanation to why this song is playing. Now, diegetic soundtracks are pretty rare to see in a video game, but still, you can achieve the same effect with a subtle soundtrack at least. Just, you don't always have to have an in-universe explanation from where the music is coming from, but just keep it subtle. I don't really know how I can say the line between where it goes from, oh, this is some nice music, to, oh, wait, where's this music coming from? Now it just breaks my immersion. I don't really know where to say where that line is. I don't know where it goes from breaking immersion to not breaking immersion. Another big immersion breaker I see, or not big, it's a common misstep, is menus in video games. I know that sounds weird, you kind of need menus, but it's a lot harder to make immersive than I'd say a soundtrack. With a soundtrack, if you're really good, you make it diegetic, or at least lower it so it's more subtle. With a menu, you're gonna have to pull up that menu eventually. Luckily for some games, menus usually only get pulled up at the beginning or the end of a play session, so at that point you're willing to put the game down, so it's all fine. But sometimes it's necessary for games like Skyrim or open world games. You need to open the menu to fast travel and stuff like that, so it gets annoying. And again, bringing up a menu makes the game less immersive because, again, like what I was talking about with the soundtracks, right? What is the in-universe explanation to why I'm opening up this menu? Why is my character in Skyrim opening up this menu? How does this work? He doesn't have a map. We never packed one. And how is he able to view an entire 3D model of the whole thing like that, right? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, an example of a menu that doesn't break immersion is in Luigi's Mansion. Now, let's compare Luigi's Mansion with Skyrim, right? Skyrim, there's no reason that your character should be able to view all these complex menus, right? It just doesn't make any sense. It's not like in real life, you'd, pull up a menu and it shows what items you should equip that are in your pockets or whatever. That's because just doesn't make any sense. But in Luigi's Mansion, it does make sense, because he pulls out his Game Boy Horror. This is a device that is established within the universe. It makes sense. Professor EGAT is giving you a device to help you out, and you look at it, and it shows you the map and the layout and everything like that. So you think in your mind, okay, that makes sense. I'm given a gadget, and this gadget gives me the ability to do something in-game. With Skyrim, it's not like that. You just have this innate ability, and it's never explained, and it doesn't make sense within the context of the universe, so it breaks immersion. But at the end of the day, I don't think immersion is an end-all be-all of if a game is good or not. I mean, you can make the most realistic game ever, and sometimes for some reason my brain just won't feel into it. And sometimes you can put down something so simple like Tetris, and it'll just, I'll click with it, and for some reason that'll be the only thing I can think about. And again, it's all based on human emotion and how we feel, so it's not an exact science. You can try to control the stuff I've talked about in this video, but it's fine, don't worry. And also, there are just some games that aren't even built with immersion in mind. So, is that saying immersion is useless? No, of course. But I appreciate the feeling of immersion. I like that feeling to get in video games. But if you don't have it, it's not the worst thing to happen. So, yeah.
Wah! Get out of here!